All right, welcome everybody to my live stream. Welcome everybody to my channel. My name is Simon Hill, Black American from Louisiana. Filming this video, it's November 3rd, 2023, out here in Budapest, Hungary. We are doing our daily live streams. This is the unpopular section of YouTube. This is the grimy section of YouTube. If you found this video, if you found this content, you're on the realest, rawest, blackest YouTube channel out here. So let's get to it. And today I have an hour and a half until my next class. So I'm just going to chop it up with y'all real quick before I get back to work. So today we're talking about Ukraine. And Ukraine is this country here in Eastern Europe. We always start our live streams off with the map when we talk about a separate country other than the US, because unfortunately, a lot of Americans and people around the world don't know basic geography. So Ukraine is this very large country here in Europe that borders Moldova, Romania, Hungary. I think that's the Czech Republic or Slovakia here, Poland, Belarus, and of course, Big Daddy Russia. And there's been a war happening in Ukraine since February 2021, I believe. Or yeah, it's been about a year or so, right? So yeah, this war has been going on for a long time. And yeah, it doesn't seem like there's going to be an end in sight. And yeah, today we're just going to be analyzing the events on the ground, what's happening in Ukraine. And on this channel, this is a very pro-black channel, anti-white supremacist channel. And I've made it very clear on this channel that we have no dog in any fight that does not include us, as in black people. So we're not rooting for Ukraine. We're not rooting for Russia. We're not rooting for any group of people other than us, because both groups, in fact, all groups who are not us, outside of us, practice anti Black racism. In Ukraine, there's a battalion of people called Azov who are open neo Nazis, white supremacists. In Russia, white supremacy runs rampant. There are people there who are blatantly anti-black and very racist towards people that look like me and people that might look like you as well. So we're not rooting for either side. But it is an interesting event that's happening that does have geopolitical consequences for the rest of the countries and nations around the world. So that's why it's important to just talk about Ukraine and see what's happening. So we're going to be reading two articles today from this story. Is Ukraine winning this war or is it not? So this is the first article we will read today. It's from Reuters.com. Ukrainian troops battle exhaustion as war drags into second winter. This was written by Max Hunder, published on November 3rd, 2023, and updated only 3 minutes ago. So this is fresh off the press. Here's a picture here. Servicemen of the 67th Mechanized Brigade of the Armed Forces of Ukraine appear at a position in front line near Kremlina amid Russia's attack on Ukraine in Luhansk region, Ukraine, November 2nd. So here's more pictures of these guys doing battle and stuff like that. I'm not going to lie. Often I go to a website called Chaotic, Kaotic, and I watch videos on there. And yeah, they have a lot of content on there showing the war in Ukraine and all its graphicness. You know, people getting drone bombs dropped on their groins, people with their arms and legs missing. It's very graphic what's happening there. And we live in a very interesting age where social media has allowed us to see what's really happening when war happens. And there's no glory in war. War is not something that we should vaunt or laud. It's hell. War is hell. Anyway, let's get to this. So Ukraine's counteroffensive has yielded little so far. As winter approaches, reality of a long war sets in. Soldiers on front line are exhausted but highly motivated. Kiev says more support needed from West to gain initiative. So this is near Kremina, Ukraine, November 3rd, Reuters. Istork, a 26-year-old soldier in eastern Ukraine, finally managed to fall asleep one morning, exhausted from the relentless battles against Russian forces in the Pinewood Forest near Kremina. His rest was cut short just an hour later when a fresh firefight broke out, forcing the senior combat medic back into action in a fierce and lengthy exchange. We had a firefight for over 20 hours, said Istork, identified by his military call sign. Nonstop fighting, assaults, evacuations, and I managed it, he told a Reuters reporter visiting his position on Thursday. And and we all managed it. We aren't very fresh, and right now we need to find strength. His description of recent clashes and the fatigue that he and his unit are experiencing underscore the huge strain that the war, now in its 21st month, is putting on Ukraine's limited resources and on its troops. The soldiers also know that Russia has a far bigger army and more weapons and ammunition, raising the uncomfortable question of how Ukraine can ever repel the invaders once and for all in Europe's bloodiest conflict since World War II. That's the thing. Of course, Russia has a much larger population. It's in the hundreds of millions. And Ukraine, I believe, has a population of around 20 or 40 million, something like that. And so, yeah, just the sheer numbers alone, if half of the men in the country, right, that leaves about what, 10 million, 20 million men, something like that. And how are 20 million men going to fight back hundreds of millions against of men from Russia, right? And yes, the West and other countries are pouring money and aid into Ukraine, but how long can you actually last against just a horde of invaders? This is why I think, Putin probably saw this in the long term. I think Putin is probably a very long term thinker and saw that the war in Ukraine wasn't just going to be, a 3 month event. He was prepared to be in there for years to totally destabilize Ukraine, to make it almost unlivable and untenable to continue to defend the nation. And so that's probably what we're looking at here. But Ukraine still has some things in their corner: endless money supplied from the US, endless weapons supplied from the US and other nations as well, and plus what is considered the moral high ground, because many people around the world view Russia's antagonism and invasion of Ukraine as totally unjustifiable. So they have that in their corner as well. So who knows? Who knows how this could turn out? But it's not looking good because, once again, the numbers are on Russia's side. More weapons, more people, more bodies willing to go to the front lines. So let's continue building here. Ukraine's commander in chief, Valery Zaluzhny, described a stalemate on the battlefield in an interview published this week, adding that a protracted attritional war would favor Russia and could threaten the very state. Only new capabilities, including more supplies from Western allies, as well as locally produced drones, would tip the balance back in Kiev's favor, Zaluzhny said. The highly respected general's stark assessment coincides with the advent of seasonal rains, which makes it harder to advance over muddy ground, and follows a summer counteroffensive which has liberated far less territory than Kiev had hoped. For this, in the trenches, while exhaustion is unavoidable, motivation remains strong. For those, all right, sorry, I made a mistake here. Made a mistake. For those in the trenches, while exhaustion is unavoidable, motivation remains strong. Istyork, speaking in a broad West Ukrainian accent, recounts his grim experiences with a winning smile. Asked whether he could continue to fight for another year or even two, he replied, "I think so, for sure." Faltering offensive. Istyork serves in a rifles battalion of the 67th Mechanized Brigade in the Serebryansky Forest in the Luhansk region. Most of the province is occupied by the Russians. The ground around the road to the trenches is dotted with craters from incoming shells and charred trees that have snapped in half from the explosions. Fighting of this kind is raging along the front lines, running from the border with Russia's Belgorod region in the northeast all the way to the Black Sea in the south. Istyork said Russia had taken huge losses in the area. 5 Ukrainian soldiers in an evacuation team were also killed by recent shelling nearby, he added. Reuters could not independently verify his account of casualties, but tens of thousands of troops have died in battle over 20 months of a conflict that shows no sign of ending. Having focused on defense earlier in the year, Ukraine launched a counteroffensive in June in a bid to wrest back the initiative and cut Russia's supply lines by thrusting southward towards the Sea of Azov. 5 months on, that objective remains a distant dream. Ukrainian forces are some 80 to 90 kilometers from the coast, and extensive Russian defenses have so largely held firm. Very interesting what they're saying here. So, yeah, basically, this area, all down here, near the Sea of Azov, is basically under Russian control. I think all of this area, from this red area right here, the Russian-backed separatist area of Ukraine, to Crimea, is basically all Russia now. Basically, this is like Russia has entrenched themselves there, and these positions are hard to move out. Like it would take Ukraine throwing everything against the wall to be able to get to the Sea of Azov. And yeah, they're basically in trench warfare, just stuck there, shooting back and forth at each other. So, more dramatic advances are still possible. Last year, Russian forces swiftly retreated from positions in Kherson region in early November, but offensive operations could be stymied by muddy conditions. It's just one thing to run 300 meters to an enemy position in June, and totally another when you are up to your knees in mud, warm clothes, protective gear, a backpack with spare clothes. Colonel Alexander Popov, an artillery reconnaissance brigade commander whose units also operate in the area, told Reuters this week. The drone pilots from his brigade appeared less tired than those in infantry units nearby. Michael Kaufman, senior fellow at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, said the conflict had reached a transitional phase where both sides hold the initiative in different parts of the front. Overall, Ukraine's offensive in the south has either culminated or is about to. I love how these think tank guys use double speak, a transitional phase. Yeah, a transitional phase. I think what he's trying to say is that Ukraine has the up in some places and Russia has the up on others. Basically, this whole southeast area of Ukraine is now Russia now. And this part that is northern of Ukraine is basically still under Ukrainian hands, and it's going to be hard for Russia to make inroads there. So that's what I think he means by transitional phase. Let's continue here. So, artillery warfare. Key battles along the front, stretching nearly 1,000 kilometers, 620 miles, are raging around the eastern cities of Bakhmut, Avi, Avdivka, and Kupiansk, while two main thrusts are taking place in the south, one near Orikhiv and another south of Velika Novosilka. Okay, these Slavic names are so hard. I should be able to pronounce them better after my time in Serbia, but yeah, they're still very hard. Artillery would remain a key weapon in the winter, according to Popov, adding that it was more effective when targets were more static and bare trees provided little camouflage for troops on the ground, something that affected both sides. While the colonel noted a near threefold drop in the number of Russian artillery strikes in the Lyman sector of the front last month when compared to October 2022, some experts said that both sides had limited stocks of ammunition. Yeah, I doubt that, Russia is running out of ammunition. I mean, come on. They could mass produce weapons easily. Ukraine, on the other hand, it might be hard logistically for the U.S. and other nations to funnel them more and more guns and ammunition. But either way, I don't think either side is running out of weapons. They're still busting those guns. So my sense is that the artillery advantage that Ukraine had for much of its offensive is now going to recede, and that Ukraine's ammunition availability is going to be constrained, said Kaufman. Russia will also be forced to conserve ammunition, but will now increasingly benefit from the influx of supply coming from North Korea. Away from the battlefield, Ukraine has sought to knock out Russian air defenses, aircraft, and naval assets using long range missiles supplied by the West, hoping that such attacks make it harder for the enemy to support frontline troops. Russia, meanwhile, has kept up its bombardment of Ukraine using drones and missiles in what it says is a targeted military campaign, but which has killed thousands of civilians and knocked out infrastructure vital for heating, power, and transport. Back in the forest around Lyman, Zahid, a 26-year-old officer, said the next phase of the war could be tough and a true test of character for the military. We're exhausted, they're exhausted, but there are more of them and they have more equipment. This is the thing, man. It's looking real dire for Ukraine. It's looking real dire on the front lines and in the long scheme of these things. You get what I'm saying? And listen, I'm not hoping for Ukraine to lose. I don't care. And I'm not hoping for Russia to lose or win. I don't care. It's just looking very hard for Ukraine to say that they want to get all of their territory back or even Crimea back, and that Russia will just leave this territory. I think honestly, if I'm being real, if I'm being absolutely real, if I were Joe Biden or if I were Zelensky, I would try to negotiate a peace. Unfortunately, we will have to cede some land, but this is just the cost. I mean, if we want to see more bloodshed, yeah, we can keep on fighting until the end of time, right? But honestly, these places in the southeast area, the Sea of Azov and Crimea, they're basically gone. And you know what Russia is going to do? Russia is going to flood more Russian people in there. They're going to give out Russian passports like it's candy. They're going to say now this is a integral part of Russia, and any infringement on this territory will get the full retaliation of the Russian military. There's a possibility that a nuclear option is on the table as well, because Russia, of course, has the largest amount of nuclear weapons in the world. Yeah, this could get really messy and ugly if it continues, right? More and more people are going to go into the meat grinder. And Zelensky is standing strong on defending Ukraine's territory. But honestly, let's just keep it absolutely real. Russia did their thing. They bust their guns and they got some land. Maybe they thought they were going to be able to take all of Ukraine, but they didn't expect maybe the rest of the world to rally around Ukraine so much, because Ukraine has such a reputation for being corrupt, having so much disorganization, for basically being like a mafia state. So Russia thought, hey, nobody's going to care if I take Ukraine. Nobody really cared when I took Crimea. So let's just continue going down that road. You get what I'm saying? But now that the world is sort of like helping Ukraine stand on their own too, it's very hard to imagine this war going away where, you know, either side gets totally what they want. And it's going to be hard to tell the people. If I was Zelensky, it's going to be hard to tell the people, hey, we fought a good fight. We kept the Russians from taking all of our country. We're always going to defend Ukrainian people, but we're going to have to give up some land. That's the only way to end the war. That's the only way, really. It's going to be hard for him to say that to his people, because his people will be like, you're betraying us. You sold us out to the Russians. You're not a real fighter. How many men died to fight for Ukraine, and we're just going to give away parts of our country? It's a very tricky tightrope, Zelensky is walking right here when it comes to, finding peace and continuing on in the war. He's going around rallying different countries, rallying different people to continue to fund his war efforts and, continue to isolate Russia and put sanctions on Russia. But it's very hard to imagine a future where Ukraine just gets all of it. I'm very interested to hear what y'all think. Y'all leave a chat. Y'all leave a comment on if you think Ukraine can actually win this war, or if Russia can win this war. I find it impossible for Russia to take all of Ukraine, and then for Ukraine to even take back the territory that Russia has sort of taken and really annexed, like Crimea, like Donetsk, like a whole area above the Sea of Azov. I find it hard to find this war, going away where, they're going to win. That's what I honestly think. But let's go to the other article here, the last article we will read today. And this is an article from Time Magazine. Nobody believes in our victory like I do. Inside Volodymyr Zelensky's struggle to keep Ukraine in the fight. So this is a very interesting article from Time that a lot of people were talking about. So let's get into it. Zelensky leaves a contentious meeting with U.S. senators in the Capitol on September 21st. There's Mitch McConnell right here, the Republican leader of the Senate. And here's Chuck Schumer, the Democratic leader of the Senate. And here's a security guard who is still scared and traumatized from January 6th. Basically, what I imagine is that the Republicans are kind of tired of sending money to Ukraine. Republicans went from being war hawks, proto-neo-fascists, who wanted to spread American ideals throughout the world through warmongering. But since Donald Trump came into office, basically they've turned isolationist, and now all they want to do is spend billions of dollars on Americans, white Christian Americans, right, and kick out the illegals and not worry about the rest of the world. And this is something that also a lot of Democrats possibly agree with as well, because Democrats say that we need to spend more on American infrastructure, American citizens, handouts and that sort of stuff, and create a social safety net, which we should in America. Anyway, let's go here. This article was written by Simon Schuster in Kiev, updated on November 1st, 2023, published originally on October 30th, 2023 for Time Magazine. Volodymyr Zelensky was running late. The invitation to his speech at the National Archives in Washington had gone out to several hundred guests, including congressional leaders and top officials from the Biden administration. Billed as the main event of his visit in late September, it would give him a chance to inspire U.S. support against Russia with the kind of oratory the world has come to expect from Ukraine's wartime president. It did not go as planned. That afternoon, Zelensky's meeting at the White House and the Pentagon delayed him by more than an hour, and when he finally arrived to begin his speech at 6:41 p.m., he looked distant and agitated. He relied on his wife, First Lady Olena Zelenska, to carry his message of resilience on the stage beside him, while his own delivery felt stilted, as though he wanted to get it over with. At one point, while handing out medals after the speech, he urged the organizer to hurry things along. The reason, he later said, was the exhaustion he felt that night, not only from the demands of leadership during the war, but also the persistent need to convince his allies that with their help, Ukraine can win. Nobody believes in our victory like I do. Nobody. Zelensky told Time in an interview after his trip, instilling that belief in his allies. He said, takes all your power, your energy. You understand? It takes so much of everything. This is the cover of Time that everybody was talking about. Time, nobody believes in our victory like I do, a red cover. It's been nearly 2 years. Russia still controls a fifth of Ukraine's territory. Tens of thousands have been killed. Global support for the war is shrinking. The lonely fight of Volodymyr Zelensky. Zelensky has one of the hardest jobs in the world, man. He has to be the leader, the president of a country, and a wartime president as well. And honestly, he's probably thinking of the fight for Ukraine as the fight for his life. Because honestly, if Ukraine falls, he'll have to go into hiding if he's able to escape Ukraine. And yeah, he'll have to live forever in fear because, Russia sends assassins out there in the world. He could die of a bad case of an illness called falling out of a window or poisoning or something like that. And yeah, Putin would not forget. Putin would try to possibly kill Zelensky if Zelensky was able to get out of Ukraine, but Russia took all of Ukraine. You get what I'm saying? And so, yeah, he probably views this as his fight for survival, honestly. Because if he loses the war, honestly, or if he gives an inch, like I said, if Ukraine actually gives up territory to end the war, Ukrainians might turn on him too and call him a traitor and might try to kill him too. So I think Zelensky is in a very precarious situation, and it's not an envious one at all. So it is only getting harder. 20 months into the war, about a fifth of Ukraine's territory remains under Russian occupation. Tens of thousands of soldiers and civilians have been killed, and Zelensky can feel during his travels that global interest in the war has slackened. So has the level of international support. The scariest thing is that part of the world got used to the war in Ukraine, he says. Exhaustion with the war rolls along like a wave. You see it in the United States, in Europe, and we see that as soon as they start to get a little tired, it becomes like a show to them. I can't watch this rerun for the 10th time. Absolutely. I mean, Zelensky, the world sort of gets used to conflict. We got used to Israel and Palestine. We got used to North Korea and South Korea. We got used to the Mexican drug cartels. People have a high degree of an ability to tolerate violence and injustice across the world. And also, people realize very quickly, well, there's nothing really we can do. We can wave blue and yellow flags, we can march, we can protest, we can put sanctions on Russia, but Putin is dedicated to trying to take Ukraine, and Biden is dedicated to funding Ukraine at any cost, giving them whatever they want. And so then, yeah, the world is just like, well, if this is what it comes down to, what can we actually do about it? Now, should the U.S. actually be sending billions and billions of dollars to Ukraine? I think there is some argument. I think there is some argument to say that, fighting Russia is sort of helping protect democracy and freedom and sovereignty of states. Because let's keep it real. If a country invaded your country, whatever country you're from, you would not think that's cool, and you would possibly want to fight back. You would probably even join the army yourself or pick up a weapon to defend your nation, right? That's just human nature. And on face value, just thinking about it logically, what Russia did was absolutely wrong. Like, they should not be trying to invade Ukraine. If Ukraine wants to be a separate country and they were a separate country, let them be a separate country. And the US should be trying to support them. But should it be an endless supply of money, of weapons, that sort of stuff? I think not. I think certainly at this point in the war, there is a good argument to make that Ukraine should make a deal to give up some territory to end the bloodshed, honestly. And if I were President Biden sitting down with Zelensky, not publicly, but in a meeting, I would tell Zelensky, listen, there's only so much that we can actually do. Yes, the US is the richest nation. We have an unlimited bank account. We can continue to fund you for forever. Yes, we can do that. But we also have to think about the political and social consequences of this. You get what I'm saying? Me as president, as Biden, I'm running for reelection. I gotta beat Trump, who is a fascist who could destroy the US government and that sort of stuff. I gotta think about my country too, the same way you're thinking about your country, Zelensky. So let's make a deal, honestly. Let's try to slowly make some communication, negotiations with the Russians in the back rooms, and find a way to make this deal where the hostilities will end, the retaliation will end, the shooting will end, and there will be absolutely no more land taken from Ukraine. We can accept Ukraine into NATO. We will protect Ukraine to the fullest extent of NATO if y'all give up some territory. Crimea has to go. Sea of Azov, that area, that southeastern part of Ukraine, it has to go. And I guarantee you, Zelensky, no more Russian aggression. That's what I would say if I were Biden. If I were Biden, I would make that deal. Give up some land and you'll join NATO, and you will never, ever, ever have any more Russian problems. We will nuke Moscow if that's what it comes down to protect Ukraine further. That's what I would say, honestly, because it's very hard to see Ukraine continuing to stay in this war. That's my opinion. Anyway, public support for aid to Ukraine has been in decline for months in the US, and Zelensky's visit did nothing to revive it. Some 41% of Americans want Congress to provide more weapons to Kiev, down from 65% in June, when Ukraine began a major counteroffensive, according to Reuters, survey taken shortly after Zelensky's departure. That offensive has proceeded at an excruciating pace and with enormous losses, making it ever more difficult for Zelensky to convince partners that victory is around the corner. With the outbreak of war in Israel, even keeping the world's attention on Ukraine has become a major challenge. Absolutely. So, after his visit to Washington, Time followed the president and his team back to Kiev, hoping to understand how they would react to the signals they had received, especially the insistent calls for Zelensky to fight corruption inside his own government and the fading enthusiasm for a war with no end in sight. On my first day in Kiev, I asked one member of his circle how the president was feeling. The response came without a second's hesitation: angry. The usual sparkle of his optimism, his sense of humor, his tendency to liven up a meeting in the war room with a bit of banter or a bawdy joke, none of that has survived into the second year of an all-out war. Now he walks in, he gets the updates, gives the orders, and walks out. Says he feels betrayed by his Western allies. They have left him without the means to win the war, only the means to survive it. I mean, I feel Zelensky because, like I said, he has the world's hardest job. He's in a position that nobody would want to be in or should be in, honestly. But I feel like he's being a bit ungrateful when he says that the U.S. or the Western allies are not giving him enough to win the war. They're giving him billions of dollars. They're giving them tanks, artillery, drones, jets, all sorts of stuff to help win the war. And he has to realize that they can't give him everything. They like what does Zelensky want from the US? Do they want him does Zelensky want the US to give him a nuke? Does Zelensky want the US to give him, I don't know, our Iron Man suits that we have hidden really for when World War III pops off? To start shooting lasers at Russians. You get what I'm saying? Because I know the U.S. got mad weapons in at Area 51 we could pull out that could basically end all life in existence, right? I know we got that in the closet. You know what I mean? But Zelensky, you're not going to get it because we don't want to start World War III. We're not going to give you the super flying, UFO jets that can fly across Russia and nuke that thing out of existence because we don't want to start World War III, honestly. And we know that's what you probably would want to do. You want to get the big, heavy, big bazooka that you can launch at the Russians to basically end this thing for real. And then what do we have? We have the Russians saying, oh, the Americans are attacking Russia. And then boom, mad. It's over. Mutually assured destruction. You get what I'm saying? So I feel like Zelensky is being a bit ungrateful. Like they're not going to give him the heavy duty stuff. They're going to give you the M16s and the jets and the tanks, but they're not going to give you the stuff that's going to really antagonize Russia. Y'all got to fight. Y'all got to win this war. Y'all want to defend your territory? Stand up and defend your territory. You're getting a lot of help. You're getting more help than other nations who are fighting for their freedom ever got, right? You get what I'm saying? Like, America didn't do this for Yemen. America didn't do this for, several other people across the world that are fighting against aggression and oppression. You get what I'm saying? Y'all are getting a lot. And yeah, it might be frustrating that they're not giving you more, but you're getting a lot. So don't be ungrateful, honestly. So, but his convictions haven't changed. Despite the recent setbacks on the battlefield, he does not intend to give up fighting or to sue for any kind of peace. On the contrary, his belief in Ukraine's ultimate victory over Russia has hardened into a form that worries some of his advisors. It is immovable, verging on the messianic. He deludes himself. One of his closest aides tells me in frustration, "We're out of options. We're not winning," but telling him that. Very I didn't expect this type of, how can I say, journalism or characterization of Zelensky in mainstream US media, because usually they give him very glowing praise. Zelensky's stubbornness, some of his aides say, has hurt their team's efforts to come up with a new strategy, a new message. As they have debated the future of the war, one issue has remained taboo: the possibility of negotiating a peace deal with the Russians. Judging by recent surveys, most Ukrainians would reject such a move, especially if it entailed the loss of any occupied territory. Zelensky remains dead set against even a temporary truce. For us, it would mean leaving this wound open for future generations, the president tells me. Maybe it will calm some people down inside our country and outside, at least those who want to wrap things up at any price. But for me, that's a problem because we are left with this explosive force. We only delay its detonation. For now, he is intent on winning the war on Ukrainian terms, and he is shifting tactics to achieve that. Aware that the flow of Western arms could dry up over time, the Ukrainians have ramped up production of drones and missiles, which they have used to attack Russian supply routes, command centers, and ammunition depots far behind enemy lines. The Russians have responded with more bombing raids against civilians, more missile strikes against infrastructure that Ukraine will need to heat homes and keep the lights on through the winter. Zelensky describes it as a war of wills, and he fears that if the Russians are not stopped in Ukraine, the fighting will spread beyond its borders. I've long lived with this fear, he says. A third world war could start in Ukraine, continue in Israel, and move on from there to Asia, and then explode somewhere else. That was his message in Washington: help Ukraine stop the war before it spreads and before it's too late. He worries his audience has stopped paying attention. Yeah, Zelensky, I mean, this is horrible and graphic, and I don't want to get demonetized, so I'm not going to show that. But it shows paramedics help a wounded man after a Russian rocket attack in the eastern Ukrainian city. Yeah, I mean, come on. Yes, I think I definitely think the war in Ukraine could definitely start World War III before the Israeli-Palestinian conflict could. I think that's more of a powder keg because you have an active, nuclear powered nation. Uh, you know, in open combat with a declared war on another nation, right? And or the special military operation. And meanwhile, in Israel, yes, Israel has nuclear weapons, but they're dealing with more of an internal issue with the Palestinian problem, right? Because the Palestinians, in a sense, deserve to be there, but Russia does not deserve to be in Ukraine in a way. You get what I'm saying? So I think the war in Ukraine could definitely start World War III, and that's why they need to negotiate a peace to end it as soon as possible. Yes, the Ukrainians might find it unpopular or distasteful to give up land to an aggressive country like Russia, but that's what happened in Crimea. And honestly, do you want to see more of your brothers and sisters and husbands and fathers and cousins die in Ukraine? No, let's end the war and let's get on to something new. So, at the end of last year, during his previous visit to Washington, Zelensky received a hero's welcome. The White House sent a U.S. Air Force jet to pick him up in eastern Poland a few days before Christmas, and with an escort from a NATO spy plane and an F-15 Eagle fighter, deliver him to Joint Base Andrews outside the U.S. Capitol. That evening, Zelensky appeared before a joint session of Congress to declare that Ukraine had defeated Russia in a battle for minds of the world. Watching his speech from the balcony, I counted 13 standing ovations before I stopped keeping track. One senator told me he could not remember a time in his 3 decades on Capitol Hill when a foreign leader received such an admiring reception. A few right wing Republicans refused to stand or applaud for Zelensky, but the votes to support him were bipartisan and overwhelmingly throughout last year. Sorry. This time around, the atmosphere had changed. Assistance to Ukraine had become a sticking point in the debate over the federal budget. One of Zelensky's foreign policy advisors urged him to call off the trip in September, warning that the atmosphere was too fraught. Congressional leaders declined to let Zelensky deliver a public address on Capitol Hill. His aides tried to arrange an in person appearance for him on Fox News and an interview with Oprah Winfrey. Neither one came through. Wow. 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 I mean, Oprah is all about the ratings. So even Oprah is like, yo, Ukraine don't get ratings. Just like this live stream right now. This live stream has zero engagement, zero people watching. Ukraine don't pull no eyes no more. It used to be the talk of the town, the biggest show. Now Zelensky is like a washed up actor, man. Damn. Damn, even Oprah don't want to interview Zelensky. That's a shame. Can't even get on Fox News, bro. I'm pretty sure I could get on Fox News. I'm pretty sure I could find a way to go viral, say something stupid or crazy online to get on Fox News very easily. Even Zelensky got turned down on Fox News. That's a shame. And of course, them not letting him speak on Capitol Hill, that's because the Republicans and the Democrats are fighting over money that there's an endless supply of, but they continue to tell us that we don't have enough money to take care of our citizens, but we got enough to, spend billions in Ukraine and that sort of stuff, and give it to Egypt and Israel and that sort of stuff. But yeah, it's crazy our political situation, because every year they fight over the budget when the US has like an infinite money supply and they can continue to just press those zeros into the computer. But yeah, Zelensky is not getting any more of those zeros, and maybe he's mad about that. He's not getting any attention. Well, they're still giving him money. Let me take that back. They're still giving Ukraine billions of dollars, but he's not getting the attention or support. They're giving him the money like begrudgingly, like how you give it to like maybe a homeless person who bothered you out of it. Like, here you go. Here's 20. You know what I'm saying? So instead, on the morning of September 21st, Zelensky met in private with then House Speaker Kevin McCarthy before making his way to the old Senate chamber, where lawmakers grilled him behind closed doors. Most of Zelensky's usual critics stayed silent in the session. Senator Ted Cruz strolled in more than 20 minutes late. The Democrats, for their part, wanted to understand where the war was headed and how badly Ukraine needed U.S. support. They asked me straight up, if we don't give you the aid, what happens? Zelensky recalls, what happens is we will lose. Whoa. Damn, the US is so savage. We are so savage. Damn, that's crazy. Maybe white supremacy does not exist. Because even Ted Cruz and all the other white Republicans and senators and Democrats, they're like, yo, what happens if we don't give you the money, man? And he said, we're going to lose. And they probably said, okay. That's crazy. That's funny. All right. Zelensky's performance left a deep impression on some of the lawmakers present. Angus King, an independent senator from Maine, recalled the Ukrainian leader telling his audience, you're giving money, we're giving our lives, but it was not enough. 10 days later, Congress passed a bill to temporarily avert a government shutdown. It included no assistance for Ukraine. Damn. Damn. It's crazy. But still, I mean, how quickly can you burn through billions of dollars? Because before the US sort of slowed down on spending for Ukraine, because we're still going to give money to Ukraine, right? But how fastly can you burn through billions of dollars? Didn't Biden make like a pledge of like $40 billion to Ukraine or something like that just a few weeks ago? And continuously, they're going to continue to do that. I mean, it seems like how can, in just a few months, even though you're fighting a war, how quickly can you burn through billions of dollars? You get what I'm saying? I don't know. By the time Zelensky returned to Kiev, the cold of early fall had taken hold, and his aides rushed to prepare for the second winter of the invasion. Russian attacks on Ukrainian infrastructure have damaged power stations and parts of the electricity grid, leaving it potentially unable to meet spikes in demand when the temperature drops. 3 of the senior officials in charge of dealing with this problem told me blackouts would likely be more severe this winter, and the public reaction in Ukraine would not be as forgiving. Last year, people blamed the Russians. One of them says this time they'll blame us for not doing enough to prepare. The cold will also make a the cold will also make military advances more difficult, locking down the front lines at least until the spring. But Zelensky has refused to accept that. Freezing the war to me means losing it, he says. Before the winter sets in, his aides warned me to expect major changes in their military strategy and a major shakeup in the president's team. At least one minister would need to be fired, along with a senior general in charge of the counteroffensive, they said, to ensure accountability for Ukraine's slow progress at the front. We're not moving forward, says one of Zelensky's close aides. Some frontline commanders, he continues, have begun refusing orders to advance, even when they came directly from the office of the president. They just want to sit in the trenches and hold the line, he says. But we can't win a war that way. Well, Zelensky, you go out there on the trenches then. Damn. See, this is the thing, man. This is the tradition of war. The tradition of war is old men, fat old men tell young men to go and die for something that they believe in, right? And listen, I think when they said earlier that a lot of Ukrainians would not be okay with giving up some land to end the war in Russia, I think they should also poll the young men out there fighting. You get what I'm saying? Because it's easy for the people in Kiev, in the cities, sipping their lattes, or in other parts of the country to say, let's not give up any territory, and I'm willing to fight and die for Ukraine and stuff like that. Then you hand them a bulletproof vest and a gun and tell them, okay, you're going to the east. Now it starts switching up. Now it starts changing and that sort of stuff. I think, honestly, the soldiers on the front line should be the ones to decide, should this war continue, honestly. And I'm pretty sure if I was a Ukrainian frontline soldier, I'd be saying something like, yo, this territory ain't really worth it. Is it worth it for me to risk my life for my brothers to die in arms with me just over this land and territory? Honestly, you get what I'm saying? And I'm not trying to demoralize the Ukrainian people, and I can't even imagine what it's like to be a soldier in the front line trying to defend your country and that sort of stuff. But I'm just saying, man, like honestly, when does it end? When does this actually end? And I'm pretty sure the people who have seen life end right in front of them have a better understanding about what this means. So Zelensky getting mad that people want to sit in the trenches and not run over them and get shot immediately. You got to chill, buddy. You got to chill. You got to stop being ungrateful to all the countries that have spent billions of dollars trying to support your nation. You got to stop being so critical of the soldiers who are just out there in the front lines trying to make it back home to mama. You got to chill, man. Chill, Zelensky. All right, let's get back here. When I raised these claims with a senior military officer, he said that some commanders have little choice in second guessing orders from the top. At one point in early October, he said the political leadership in Kiev demanded an operation to retake the city of Horlivka, a strategic outpost in eastern Ukraine that the Russians have held and fiercely defended for nearly a decade. The answers came back in the form of a question: with what? They don't have the men or the weapons, says the officer. Where are the weapons? Where's the artillery? Where are the new recruits? Okay, so things are running very thin on the Ukrainian front line. In some branches of the military, the shortage of personnel has become even more dire than the deficit in arms and ammunition. One of Zelensky's close aides tells me that even if the U.S. and its allies come through with all the weapons they have pledged, we don't have the men to use them. That's the thing. Ukraine has a much smaller population than Russia. So, yeah, this war can't continue indefinitely, right? Like, eventually, all the Ukrainian men will either have thrown their lives away or they're too old to fight or too young to fight and that sort of stuff. So these brothers here are just, they're fighting a good fight. I think every country does have the right to defend their territory and their people and that sort of stuff. But a sacrifice might have to be made. A sacrifice of territory, of land, something that is not living, might have to be made for peace. That's all I'm saying. And then y'all can join NATO. Y'all can be in the EU. Y'all can do all that. But see, I'm sick of like the EU saying the future is Ukraine. Ukraine is going to join the EU, and the U.S. saying that they want Ukraine in NATO and that sort of stuff. When this war is still going on, and it's almost impossible to see a victory with total Ukrainian winning, like total Ukrainian control over all the territory that they lost. It's very hard to see that. So, Ukrainian fighters on the front lines near Bakhmut on March 17th, 2023. Since the start of the invasion, Ukraine has refused to release official counts of dead and wounded, but according to US and European estimates, the toll has long surpassed 100,000 on each side of the war. It has eroded the ranks of Ukraine's armed forces so badly that draft offices have been forced to call up even older personnel, raising the average age of a soldier in Ukraine to around 43 years old. They're grown men now, and they aren't that healthy to begin with, says the close aide to Zelensky. This is Ukraine, not Scandinavia. That's funny. This is Ukraine. This is Ukraine, not Scandinavia. That's funny. That's pretty funny. That's funny as hell. Damn. He said the old Ukrainians, they're full of tobacco and vodka or shliva or rakia, whatever they drink in Ukraine. And these guys got fupas that hang over their belts. You know, they can't put on the bulletproof vest because their man boobs got a sticking out on the side. You know what I mean? They holding the gun sideways, and the recoil pops out their shoulder. It's crazy. It's crazy. Anyway, the picture looked different at the outset of the invasion. One branch of the military, known as the Territorial Defense Forces, reported accepting 100,000 new recruits in the first 10 days of all-out war. The mass mobilization was fueled in part by the optimistic predictions of some senior officials that the war would be won in months, if not weeks. Many people thought they could sign up for a quick tour and take part in a heroic victory, says the second member of the president's team. Now, recruitment is way down as conscription efforts have intensified around the country. Stories are spreading on social media of draft officers pulling men off trains and buses and sending them to the front. Those with means sometimes bribe their way out of service, often by paying for a medical exemption. Such episodes of corruption within the recruitment system became so widespread by the end of the summer that on August 11th, Zelensky fired the heads of the draft offices in every region of the country. Okay, he's going nuts. The decision was intended to signal his commitment to fighting graft, but the move backfired, according to the senior military officer, as recruitment nearly ground to a halt without leadership. The fired officials also proved difficult to replace, in part because the reputation of the draft offices had been tainted. Who wants that job? The office asked. It's like putting a sign on your back that says corrupt. In recent months, the issue of corruption has strained Zelensky's relationship with many of his allies. Ahead of his visit to Washington, the White House prepared a list of anti corruption reforms for the Ukrainians to undertake. One of the aides who traveled with Zelensky to the U.S. told me these proposals targeted the very top of the state hierarchy. These were not suggestions, says another presidential advisor. These were conditions. To address the American concerns, Zelensky took some dramatic steps. In early September, he fired his Ministry of Defense. Oh, sorry. In early September, he fired his Minister of Defense, Oleksiy Reznikov, a member of his inner circle who had come under scrutiny over corruption in his ministry. Two presidential advisors told me but he failed to keep order within his ministry, one says, pointing to the inflated prices the ministry paid for supplies such as winter coats for soldiers and eggs to keep them fed. As news of these scandals spread, the president gave strict orders for his staff to avoid the slightest perception of self-enrichment. Don't buy anything, don't take any vacations, just sit at your desk, be quiet, and work. One staffer says in characterizing these directives. Some mid level officials in the administration complained to me of bureaucratic paralysis and low morale as the scrutiny of their work intensified. The typical salary in the president's office, they said, comes to about $1,000 per month, or around $1,500 for more senior officials, far less than they could make in the private sector. We sleep in rooms that are 2 by 3 meters, about the size of a prison cell, says Andriy Yermak, the presidential chief of staff, referring to the bunker that Zelensky and a few of his confidants have called home since the start of the invasion. We're not out here living the high life, he tells me in his office. All day, every day, we are busy fighting this war. Amid all the pressures to root out corruption, I assumed, perhaps naively, that officials in Ukraine would think twice before taking a bribe or pocketing state funds. But when I made this point to a top presidential advisor in early October, he asked me to turn off my audio recorder so he could speak more freely. Simon, you're mistaken, he says. People are stealing like there's no tomorrow. Insane that even in the war, when they're fighting for their independence, when they're trying to maintain their sovereignty, people still find ways to undermine the country. Yeah, those aren't patriots. Even the firing of the defense minister did not make officials feel any fear, he adds, because the purge took too long to materialize. The president was warned in February that corruption had grown rife inside the ministry, but he dithered for more than 6 months, giving his allies multiple chances to deal with the problems quietly or explain them away. By the time he acted ahead of his U.S. visit, it was too late, says another senior presidential advisor. Ukraine's Western allies were already aware of the scandal by then. Soldiers at the front had begun making off color jokes about Reznikov's eggs, a new metaphor for corruption. The reputational damage was done, says the advisor. When I asked Zelensky about the problem, he acknowledged its gravity and the threat it poses to Ukraine's morale and its relationships with foreign partners. Fighting corruption, he assured me, is among his top priorities. He also suggested that some foreign allies have an incentive to exaggerate the problem because it gives them an excuse to cut off financial support. It's not right, he says, for them to cover up their failure to help Ukraine by tossing out these accusations. So, Biden once again being creepy. Who grabs another man's arm like that? Yo, Biden is like a creepy dude, man. Just creepy, old and creepy. Doesn't know personal boundaries. But some of the accusations have been hard to deny. In August, a Ukrainian news outlet known for investigating graft, Bihus Info, published a damning report about Zelensky's top advisor on economic and energy policy, Rostislav Sherma. The report revealed that Sherma, a former executive in the energy industry, has a brother who co-owns two solar energy companies with power plants in southern Ukraine. Even after the Russians occupied that part of the country, cutting it off from the Ukrainian power grid, the companies continue to receive state payments for producing electricity. The Anti-Corruption Police, an independent agency known in Ukraine as NABU, responded to the publication by opening an embezzlement probe into Sherma and his brother. But Zelensky did not suspend his advisor. Instead, in late September, Sherma joined the president's delegation to Washington, where I saw him glad handing senior lawmakers and officials from the Biden administration. Very interesting. So even though people have been found to be corrupt within Zelensky's circle, he still keeps them in. Yeah. Anyway, soon after he returned to Kiev, I visited Sherma in his office on the second floor of the presidential headquarters. The atmosphere inside the compound had changed in the 11 months since my last visit. Sandbags had been removed from many windows as near air defense systems had arrived in Kiev, including U.S. Patriot missiles, which reduced the risk of a rocket attack on Zelensky's office. The hallways remained dark, but soldiers no longer patrolled them with assault rifles, and their sleeping mats and other gear had been cleared away. Some of the president's aides, including Sherma, had gone back to wearing civilian clothes instead of military garb. When we sat down inside his office, Sherma told me the allegations against him were part of a political attack paid by one of Zelensky's domestic enemies. A piece of shit was thrown, he says, brushing the front of his sweater. And now we have to explain that we are clean. I love these Slavic metaphors. That's a very kind of funny. A piece of shit was thrown, and now I have to explain why I am clean. No, you are shit. You are nothing. I break you. Anyway, uh, so it did not seem to trouble him that his brother is a major player in the industry that Sherma oversees. On the contrary, he spent nearly half an hour trying to convince me of the gold rush that renewable energy would see after the war. Perhaps I suggested, amid all the concerns about corruption in Ukraine, it would have been wiser for Sherma to step aside while under investigation for embezzlement, or at least sit out Zelensky's trip to Washington. He responded with a shrug. If we do that tomorrow, everybody on the team would be targeted, he says. Politics is back, and that's the problem. Very interesting. A few minutes later, Sherman's phone lit up with an urgent message that forced him to cut our interview short. The president had called his senior aides into a meeting in his office. It was normal on Monday mornings for their team to hold a strategy session to plan out the week, but this one would be different. Over the weekend, Palestinian terrorists had massacred many hundreds of civilians in southern Israel, prompting the Israeli government to impose a blockade of the Gaza Strip and declare war against Hamas. Huddled around a conference table, Zelensky and his aides tried tried to understand what the tragedy would mean for them. My mind is racing. One of them told me when he emerged from the meeting that afternoon, things are about to start moving very fast. Very interesting how Zelensky is, how he might view the Gaza Israel crisis. So Zelensky is, an Israeli, or he's a Jew, he's a Jewish person, right? And so when we think about it, Ukraine is a small country that was oppressed by Russia for many years, got their independence, and now they're wrongfully being invaded. And when we think about it, Gaza and the West Bank are people who are, very weak and powerless against a much larger force, which is the Israeli army, backed up by Western powers, money, and weapons, and that sort of stuff. And so there's probably more parallels of the sympathy, having sympathy for the Gaza or Palestinian cause and how it ties to Ukraine's. There's more similarities there. Ukraine and the West Bank and Gaza have more similarities. And most of the world, I would say most of the global South, is on the side or rooting for the Palestinians, right? Me, I don't care about either conflict, but you know, it's crazy that Zelensky probably still would side more with Israel in this case, even though Israel is practicing the same sort of hegemony on the Palestinians that Russia is practicing on Ukraine. You get what I'm saying? I hope that's absolutely clear. It's very twisted, because whenever you get involved in other people's conflicts or start thinking deeply about these geopolitical issues, you start to notice all the knots. So, from the earliest days of the Russian invasion, Zelensky's top priority and perhaps his main contribution to the nation's defense had been to keep attention on Ukraine and to rally the democratic world to its cause. Both tasks would become a lot harder with the outbreak of war in Israel. The focus of Ukraine's allies in the US and Europe and the global media quickly shifted to the Gaza Strip. It's logical, Zelensky tells me. Of course, we lose out from the events in the Middle East. People are dying, and the world's help is needed there to save lives, to save humanity. Zelensky wanted to help. After the crisis meeting with AIDS, he asked the Israeli government for permission to visit their country in a show of solidarity. The answer appeared the following week in Israeli media reports. The time is not right. Damn, Zelensky ain't got no friends. He can't even pop up in Israel. That's crazy. That's funny. Oprah don't want to talk to him. Fox News don't want to talk to him, and even the Israelis don't even want to talk to Zelensky. That's crazy. Does he have like bad breath? Because Zelensky looks like he could go like a good 2 days without brushing his teeth, low key. He looks like the type of guy who maybe wears his underwear twice, like he just flips it inside out and puts it back on under his pants to like not wash it. You get what I'm saying? Do people not like Zelensky? Does he have a bad attitude? I mean, from the outside looking in, he seems like a okay guy. You know what I mean? Have a drink with him, chill with him. I mean, he must have a bad attitude. Nobody seems to really like this guy. Doesn't have any friends. He can't even go to Israel. He can't even go to Israel. Ain't that crazy? So, a few days later, President Biden tried to break through the impasse Zelensky had seen on Capitol Hill. Instead of asking Congress to vote on another standalone package of Ukraine aid, Biden bundled it with other priorities, including support for Israel and U.S.-Mexico border security. $104 billion, with $61 billion of it for Ukraine. It's a smart investment, Biden said, that's going to pay dividends for American security for generations. So Zelensky, you're happy, you got your billions of dollars, man. And Biden, Big Daddy Biden, will make sure you get more, okay? But it was also an acknowledgement that, on its own, Ukraine aid no longer stands much of a chance in Washington. When I asked Zelensky about this, he admitted that Biden's appeared to be tied by GOP opposition. The White House, he said, remains committed to helping Ukraine, but arguments about shared values no longer have much sway over American politicians or the people who elect them. Politics is like that, he tells me with a tired smile. They weigh their own interests. At the start of the Russian invasion, Zelensky's mission was to maintain the sympathy of humankind. Now his task is more complicated. In his foreign trips and presidential phone calls, he needs to convince world leaders that helping Ukraine is in their own national interest, that it will, as Biden puts it, pay dividends. Achieving that gets harder as global crises multiply. But faced with the alternative of freezing the war or losing it, Zelensky sees no option but to press on through the winter and beyond. I don't think Ukraine can allow itself to get tired of war, he says. Even if someone gets tired on the inside, a lot of us don't admit it. The president, least of all. Very, very interesting story here. Very, very powerful reporting. Great job, Simon. Whoever wrote this, the guy's name is Simon, right? Simon Schuster, who wrote this article for Time. Very dope article. And yeah, once again, we don't have any dog in this fight. Me as a Black American, I'm rooting for the best man to win. So Russia, if you feel like you're winning, more power to you. Ukraine, if you feel like you're winning, more power to you. People who support Ukraine, people who support Russia, salute to both of y'all. Salute to anybody on either side of a conflict that has nothing to do with us. We as Black people, we're tired of going to Ukraine, getting called racial slurs. One of my biggest videos on my channel is talking about Peace Corps members going to Ukraine and them being prepared to be called racial slurs if they are people that look like me. And of course, Russia has had multiple examples of Black people going there, getting racially profiled and harassed and that sort of stuff. So yeah, neither side are friends to Black people. So we're just going to sit this one out. So best of luck to y'all. But honestly, if we did want peace in this war, if we did want it to end, the deal has to be this. Ukraine has to give up the land that basically Russia has annexed fully, like Crimea, like the area above the Sea of Azov, and like certain parts of eastern Ukraine. In return, Ukraine gets to join NATO, be a part of the EU, and they will never have any more Russian problems. That's the only way that this thing can really end. Until then, it's just going to be an endless money pit where US dollars go to burn, Ukrainian soldiers continue to die, and Russian soldiers continue to die in this never ending conflict. That's how I honestly see this conflict ending, and that's just my opinion. Of course, Russia, in my opinion, was wrong to invade Ukraine in the beginning, but at this point, war might makes right to some extent in this world we live in, unfortunately or fortunately, depending how you look at it. So yeah, Russia fought a good fight. They got some land. Ukraine fought an even better fight. Commends and hats off to them for defending their country when a lot of people thought they would fold in a few days. But let's finally make peace in this war and just cut a deal, man. And Zelensky, you'll be a hero. If people don't like you now, if you make that deal that you're going to give up some land for the end of Russian aggression, centuries from now, you'll be regarded as a hero. You've done more than, most presidents would. I know if somebody invaded the US, Biden would be on the first plane out of the country. You get what I'm saying? Like, our leaders are cowards, but Zelensky, you proved yourself to have nuts, courage, and bravery. So salute to you. But now is the time to just finally say, enough is enough. The world is starting to turn away from Ukraine. They're not as interested, and there's nothing really we can do. And do you really want to see more and more Ukrainian men die? And the same goes for Russia as well. Putin should have never started this war. Putin is sending ethnic minorities and young Russians to their grave. People are fleeing Russia left and right. It's absolutely wrong. Nobody should continue this war. It's honestly really stupid to be fighting over land like this. Just give up the territory, make peace, join NATO, join the EU, develop what you got. Even if Russia takes a sliver of your country, you're still the largest, still one of the largest, if not the largest country in Europe. And on top of that, you'll have so much funding from the West to help develop and grow as a country and economy and become more integrated to the West. So that's honestly my opinion about this Ukraine thing. But y'all let me know what you think in the comments. Thanks for watching this live stream. My name is Simon Hill. We do these daily live streams, so turn on the notifications, subscribe, like, leave a comment, share, all that's good stuff. We're going hard this month in November, and peace.